Are the Ukrainians saving cruise missiles for a massive airstrike against Russia? That's what a well-known Russian Milblogger is asking himself, while he generally assesses Russia's prospects in the war negatively. At the same time, the anger over the Wildberries attacks is mainly directed at the Russian government, not at the Ukrainians. Other Russian Milbloggers believe that Russia's mobilization is coming soon, and take Russian denials as proof. We want to talk about that, as well as everything else that has happened, and we'll take a look at the Russian casualty numbers, which we can roughly estimate given Russia's planned expansion of its own military. All of this in this update on the war in Ukraine. Holy smokes! Now save the most with my code at Holy. Thank you. The Ukrainian attacks against Russian logistics continue. A Wildberries warehouse in Yekaterinburg has now been attacked. Yekaterinburg is even farther from the front than the previous warehouses. In this case, the attack was not successful, so the building itself was not destroyed. But as we can see, a fire broke out in the parking lot. So a drone almost made it all the way to the building. Igor Girkin, the well-known Russian Milblogger, who according to his own statements started the war in eastern Ukraine, is debating why Wildberries is being attacked at all. He writes, "It's hard for me to say why the enemy chose Wildberries as a primary target. But why not actually? The enemy has a lot of drones, and their number will not decrease. But I have noticed that the enemy is using its missiles sparingly. He is saving Flamingo cruise missiles. In addition, he will soon have ballistic missiles at his disposal. He is saving them for a specific purpose. In the past, the enemy often carried out combined attacks. That means he attacked simultaneously with drones and cruise missiles. Or first with drones and then with cruise missiles after our air defense had shot down the drones. And now, as far as I know, maybe I don't have all the information, only drones are flying. So there are two possibilities. Either they currently don't have those cruise missiles. Let's assume our troops managed to destroy them somewhere, like in the main depots. Or, which in my opinion is more likely, they are preparing a massive attack, and for now are content with drone strikes on targets that are not sufficiently protected by air defenses, and that can attract a lot of attention. Now, Wildberries is quite a large retail chain, after all, to which a really large number of sellers and buyers are connected. And that is, so to speak, not a bad method for the enemy to show the Russian population that apparently there is a war going on here, and to make this clear even to those who had nothing to do with this war and still have nothing to do with it, and who believe that it doesn't concern them. It follows from this. It is unlikely that the bombings of Wildberries are of a strategic nature. These attacks will not cause strategic damage to the Russian Federation and its defense capabilities, but will, let's say, affect the mood of the population. Although, in my opinion, not as much as people in Kyiv hope. However, it is by no means certain that this really has no impact. Igor Dmitriev is a Ukrainian defector who already fled to Russia in 2014 and joined Russia. He writes on his Telegram channel, "I have watched numerous videos of crying business owners who lost their goods in the burned-down warehouses, as well as videos of strikes or impacts all over Russia. And I noticed something strange. They hardly mention Ukraine at all. Instead, they mainly direct their accusations at the country's leadership and the owners of large companies. They neither protected, nor compensated, nor warned. The war with Ukraine practically doesn't exist. It's like a kind of natural disaster that the government hasn't prevented effectively enough. The Russian leadership brought about this situation themselves when they completely excluded the population, not only from decision-making, but also from having a realistic picture of what was happening. Now they will have to bear the entire negative burden themselves. And in Ukraine, this has been well understood. Personally, I would like to add that these attacks have another strategic effect, because they make many more sites potential Ukrainian targets. This spreads the Russians even thinner in their air defense and makes a major final strike even more likely. Zelensky had announced a 40-day campaign, and it ends on August 4th. Then the 40 days are over. Maybe we'll see the major offensive that Girkin is expecting. Russia sank the Golden Leo, a ship with 7,300 deadweight tons during its attacks on Ukrainian shipping. The ship capsized today, if I'm reading it correctly, after being hit on July 19th. Presumably, anti-ship missiles were used, as the Russian military blogger Fighter Bomber wrote. 10 people died in the attack. 9 crew members and the Ukraine. Russia has also just lost an L-39. If we look at the description here, it seems it was lost along with the crew. The L-39 is a light training aircraft that was built in the Czech Republic. We have news from the front, but not much. We have the Russian Milblogger officer at the front who says that Russian soldiers are encircled in Stepnohursk. I don't have any other confirmation of that. We also don't have any information about the numbers. But the Deep Steppe map also lists Stepnohursk as contested, so it's quite possible that Russian soldiers have been encircled there. But as I said, the big question is, of course, the number. Whether we're talking about 10 or 20 or 500 here would of course make a drastic difference. And I don't see any indication that it's going to be 500. Igor Girkin has also commented on the restructuring of the Ukrainian military. And he says, I think it's possible to comment on the recent reshuffles in Kiev. Overall, I don't think they will improve the front or Ukraine's domestic political situation. This also doesn't really affect the so-called existence of Ukraine or the right to exist, so it doesn't significantly influence the so-called Ukraine. And if they have any influence at all, then it's only a very minor one. The overall picture of the current military situation of the so-called Ukraine is relatively stable and is not shaken by changes in public administration. Funds from NATO and the EU are pouring in on an unprecedented scale, as are weapons and equipment, which reflects the confidence of the donors in the stability of the Ukrainian armed forces and Kiev in general, as well as their promising prospects for continuing the conflict with Russia. Probably until now, until this year, there has never been such a firm conviction among Europe's leadership, the coalition of the willing, in Kiev's stability and its ability to endure and succeed in the war. Unfortunately, the opponents' high hopes have some basis. It's only July, and the character of the war, now in its 5th year, has already changed seriously and clearly, not in our favor. And that's an unexpected surprise for the majority, for the Russian population, since the war has knocked on so many doors, that it can no longer, even with difficulty, be perceived as a usual, distant, and incomprehensible colonial expedition, to which one can react in various ways, or simply ignore altogether. But it hardly affects the ordinary citizen in his daily life, and with each day, with every new week, the knocking at the door becomes louder and more unpleasant. You can't ignore it anymore. It's only getting worse. Our responses to the significant increase in enemy attacks in the rear offer the enemy nothing fundamentally new. The enemy has been completely used to it for 4.5 years. Even the fact that the attacks have become more frequent, more precise, and probably significantly more painful for the economy and the population of Ukraine has no particular significance. Above all, because the vital infrastructure and communication facilities required for the operation of the Ukrainian armed forces and their supply lines are still shamelessly ignored and are hardly targeted at all, except in isolated cases. That means bridges and tunnels, viaducts and other complex and difficult to repair important engineering structures. We have already talked in the past about how the Russians have actually shown impressive and cruel, almost incomprehensible restraint when it comes to attacks on bridges, for example over the Dnipro, and that this is clearly an option for the Russians to escalate and increase the problems on the Ukrainian side. He is one of those who point this out, and of course, we must not forget that the Ukrainian supplies coming from the west come in by rail, and those lines run over bridges and through tunnels, and all of this could be attacked, he says, but it is not being attacked. Do you love coffee, just like I do? Then you shouldn't miss the new Holy Milkshake flavors, because now there are 3 new iced coffee varieties with 50 milligrams of caffeine and 100% flavor. Just add the powder to the milk, shake it, and you can enjoy it right away. The 3 new flavors are latte, hazelnut, and caramel, and they will be permanently added to the range. 50 servings cost only €39.99. With Mix and Match, you can already save 20% when you buy 4 or more tubs. With the code Heinrich, you get another 10% off. So that's a total of 30%. So just go to Holy D Heinrich and order with the code Heinrich. Then you'll save 10%, and of course you'll be supporting the channel. Then we have news from the Ukrainian hinterland. There, the SBU reports that they have arrested a traitor who activated over 1,000 Starlink terminals for Russia. He was recruited via Telegram and then recruited others himself, who, just like him, registered terminals for Russia using their personal data. It's obvious that this can't go well in the long run. Here we see once again how the Russians use social media and messenger services to recruit agents, who in this case were recruited with money. Regarding the replenishment of Russian forces, Zelensky said he believes Russia wants 30. In addition to the mobilization of 500,000 men, Putin wants to recruit or obtain 30,000 more North Korean soldiers from North Korea. According to Ukraine, they have been preparing for the arrival of these North Korean soldiers in Voronezh since June. But we have to be clear here. It is currently unclear whether they are supposed to take part in the invasion of Ukraine. That is, whether they are supposed to enter Ukrainian territory. So far, the deployment of the North Koreans has taken place in Russia, during the Ukrainian invasion in Kursk. In the rear area, they can of course stay on Russian territory, and thereby free up Russian troops, which can then be used offensively. However, we have to say that 30,000 is probably what Russia loses in a month. So Russia wouldn't actually gain much by getting these North Korean troops. By the way, the Russians loudly deny that a mobilization will happen, saying that voluntary recruitment is completely sufficient. This is being passed on here by Igor, by Kirill Fedorov, and the Milblogger Alex Parker considers it evidence that mobilization will happen. He writes here, there will be a mobilization when Kartapolov has started to justify himself. And to refute the military dictator Zelensky, that's a direct quote. So this is a far-right Russian Milblogger. And to refute the military dictator Zelensky, then it's definitely the case. The special military operation and the first mobilization were also denied until the very end. That's always how they do it. As for the laws, they've been working on that for a long time. Over the past years, we've covered here on the channel how Russia, for example, has prepared to be able to draft soldiers now without having to do it in person. Draft notices can now be delivered electronically, and draftees cannot leave the country. And here, for example, we also have a case where the Russian military directly receives data from former soldiers and their relatives, according to the statement here, supposedly to be able to provide them with better support. On the other hand, of course, it means that the Russian military receives information directly from the registration offices about where a soldier, someone who may have served 8 years ago, lives today, so that they can be drafted immediately. Then we have the Russians, stating that the planned strength of the Russian armed forces will be increased to 2,426,000 personnel as of August 1st. The corresponding decree was signed by Vladimir Putin. The number of soldiers will be increased by 25,000 to 1,535,000 personnel. So the Russian military is supposed to have 1,535,000 soldiers. That's about 500,000 more than Russia had at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when Russia had between 1 million and 1,050,000, or 1,150,000, depending on which Western estimate you look at. However, Russia mobilized 300,000 in September 2022. In 2023, 540,000 were recruited, according to what Shoigu said at the time. In 2024, 450,000 were recruited, according to what Medvedev said. In 2025, 423,000 were recruited. And in the first 6 months of 2026, it was probably between 195,000 and 200,000. Over 1.9 million men who were recruited. In addition, Wagner and the volunteers from 2022 also need to be included, because of course, soldiers joined the Russian military between February and the mobilization in 2022. As well as the armies of the puppet states, they are also included, because the so-called People's Republics of Luhansk and Donetsk had their own states before, which were then incorporated into the Russian military, which today have been absorbed into the Russian military, and are counted among the targeted 1.535 million. In total, more than 2 million personnel have been raised by Russia, and the military now will be about 500,000 men larger. So what probably happened to the 1.5 million, given that the Russian military has not been releasing people from their contracts since the mobilization in 2022? In the Russian military, even if you sign a contract for a year, you won't be discharged as long as the military doesn't want to discharge you, because due to the mobilization, there is a need for soldiers, and legally, the contract can't be terminated anymore. Overall, we can see that at least 1.5 million Russian soldiers are missing, who are not included in the currently stated size of the military, but who were recruited at the same time. As I said, while Russia has suspended the termination of contracts, Wagner people, for example, were not part of the Russian military until they were integrated, so they could still leave, but they are not counted among the regular recruits. So overall, about 1.5 million men are missing. What do you think happened to them? And that's it for today's situation report. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up. Comment to add your thoughts, and if you're new, subscribe and click the bell for updates. The next situation report will be after vacation. The war update and Q&A will be next Wednesday at 8 p.m. German time. Hope to see you then. That's all for now. Thanks for your attention and see you soon. Thanks also to the supporters on Patreon as well as here on YouTube. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Mahamori, as well as Lieutenants Robert Wiel, Immelkopf, Floja Capri, Bertenment, Lichtschatter, NTX, Malermeister Nagel, Markus F., Alex Rosenthal, Matt Best, Mütter 1000 Janis Gü, Cunningham, Oistres, Finn, 5 Farbflecktal, Jans vom Eck, Uwe Dufrenne, nickname to 2bib, Carsten Schulz, Tequila 42. Thank you very much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.